consumers in the Cold War era. Social and cultural historians generally agree that teenagers were identified as a targeted market within American consumer culture in the years following World War II. In these years of the baby boom, youth culture blossomed amidst economic prosperity and a more cohesive peer culture. This adolescent youth culture raised concerns among social critics who feared that decreased parental authority would lead to generations of delinquents and open the door for subversive ideologies and activities during the Cold War era. The producers of America's most popular teen magazines at this time created publications intended to stave off subversive influences while encouraging consumer practices and defending democratic ideals, incorporating what they called responsible consumerism within youth culture. Advertisers and editorial staffs of popular magazines reflected and cultivated a unique girls' culture within the contexts of consumer culture and perceptions of idealized femininity during the 1950s and 60s. By doing so, these producers encouraged young females to become not only ideal girls, but ideal consumers as well. The sense of civic duty and the responsibility to uphold American ideals were reflected in the model of the civic consumer, notably espoused and represented in the pages of 17 magazine. However, other magazines tailored this model for their own purposes, including 16 magazine. This paper will provide an analysis of how the producers of 17 and 16 perceive their audiences and use the language, columns, and features within their pages to cultivate good girls and better consumers in the Cold War era. Teen fashion and music magazines specifically addressed a girl audience and highlighted the obstacles and concerns these girls would face in their newly discovered worlds of adolescence and consumer culture. Magazines such as 17 and 16 also facilitated the creation of a space for readers to share their feelings, concerns, and dreams while encouraging a youth consumer culture, and allowed their readers agency in creating this imagined space. Though these magazines shared many characteristics, there are very significant differences between them as well. Most notably, 17 was primarily a fashion magazine, whereas 16 was a celebrity fan magazine that focused on pop music and television stars. The greater percentage of 17's revenue was supplied by advertisers, while Gloria Stavers, the editor of 16, refused advertising from outside sources in her magazine. The implications of these differences will be considered as part of how these magazines' producers perceived and addressed their readers, girls who comprised a highly desired target consumer market during the Cold War era. 17 debuted in September of 1944 and quickly had a significant impact on the youth market and in shaping teenage trends. Within 5 years, its audience exceeded 3 million readers every month. The magazine claimed to be the voice of the aggregate population of teenage girls and declared itself the cultural mediator between the American teenage girl and advertisers, manufacturers, and the mass media in general, despite the fact that its audience was mostly white middle-class girls. 17 appealed to teenage girls because it was created specifically for them and addressed their interests and concerns. It appealed to advertisers because it brought them a consistent audience of teen consumers. 17 initiated this relationship after creating a campaign to assess teenage opinions, tastes, and buying habits, and presenting advertisers with an audience perceived as capable, reliable potential consumers who had a vital interest in learning how to shop. Advertising agencies soon produced specialized copy for 17, recognizing the influence the magazine had within teen girl culture. According to a 17 promotional director, an ad that worked in Vogue, for instance, would not suit the wholesome, fresh-faced girls who read 17. Meanwhile, the editors carefully shaped teenage tastes along conventional middle-class lines, which reflected the magazine's audience. Editor Helen Valentine championed the teenage desire for personal freedom, but always in the context of personal responsibility. And her editorial tone was that of a friendly yet concerned older sister. In each monthly issue, 17 offered mini courses in home economics and notes on where teenagers could buy the products they needed to put these plans into action. The magazine also provided tips and regimens for grooming, dieting, and fashion that not only took the worry out of teenage life, but introduced young readers to products and manufacturers that promised to solve their problems. The magazine was highly influential as a mediator between marketers and consumers. Seventeen developed the image of the teenage girl as a consumer of the magazine and the products advertised within its covers, but also as a member of society. The editors and publishers of Seventeen espoused the idea of civic consumerism, combining one's democratic role as active citizen with one's duty as a responsible and active consumer. Just as Seventeen's staff negotiated with its advertisers, it also negotiated with readers, responding to them but ultimately controlling the final product, with a desire to help girls forge their own way through their problems and the world, and at the same time a wish to communicate directly with girls as responsible young women. This civic consumerism could be identified throughout the features in the magazine, which cultivated insecurity and the constant need for personal improvement similar to its advertising content, but also recommended books on inflation and atomic energy, offered articles on politics and world affairs, and encouraged its readers to take responsibility for themselves and become active, questioning citizens. Seventeen's producers encouraged their readers not only to be ideal girls, but also ideal Americans through the practices of consumerism. Seventeen's approach to its audience suited both ideals, as it taught inexperienced consumers the fine points of intelligent buying, how to devise a budget and live within it, how to evaluate quality and price, and how to distinguish the important differences between short-term style and long-term satisfaction. This satisfaction was usually depicted as productive domestic futures, complete with college educations, diamond engagement rings, silver tea services, and hope chests. Satisfaction was a prominent theme in another teen magazine of the Cold War era, 16 magazine. However, the satisfaction 16 promoted was less focused on traditional concepts of consumerism and more focused on cultivating a Dreamsville for its readers, replete with attractive young men, hip music stars, trendy fashions, and secret sisters who would assist teenage girls during their journey. Given its significant readership, 16 was another publication that was highly influential as a mediator between marketers and consumers. However, 16 did not accept advertising from outside marketers, which required more subtle forms of consumer cultivation and greater influence from its very popular editor, Gloria Stavers. 16 debuted in May 1957, and in its earliest issues was subtitled The Magazine for Smart Girls, with, according to its publishers, its only product being fantasy. It has in fact been called the first magazine to capture that fantastical celebrity magic for a very specific teenage audience. By the mid-1960s, simultaneous with the popularity of the Beatles and the Monkees, 16 averaged sales of over 1 million copies per issue. However, many more readers were exposed to 16 every month. That 1 million sales figure didn't take into account the ever-popular pass-along readership factor, and the magazine brazenly bragged on its masthead, 16 is the top favorite of over 7 million readers. Stavers realized that, rather than a mere fan magazine, her readers were searching for a space in which they could not only read about their favorite stars, but also express their own feelings about these stars and much more. She paid close attention to the letters from fans, once noting, quote, "The readers cared about the things they could relate to. How old was the performer? Did he have a girlfriend? What did he eat for breakfast? What was his favorite TV show? What music did he listen to?" End quote. The concept behind Gloria Stavers' 16 was that of a private sphere that brought together femininity, leisure, and consumerism while focusing on style, fashion, and pop music. In the early 1960s, female stars such as Connie Francis and Leslie Gore were featured as secret sisters, whose advice columns revealed the keys to gaining popularity, dealing with parents, and expressing interest in a boy. If those bits of advice were not enough, 16 offered numerous publications that could assist a girl in her attempts to become an ideal girl, including the perpetually promoted 16's popularity and beauty book. The names and likenesses of the secret sisters who provided advice in the magazine lent credibility as models for ideal girls, and if anything, encouraged conformity rather than individualism. Readers learned from female fashion icons such as Shelley Fabares and Cher what signifiers would be useful in attracting the right boys. Later, after the magazine and teen culture were overwhelmingly influenced by British trends, features on how to look like a Beatles girlfriend were interspersed with advice columns from popular British models, such as Patty Boyd, Jill Stewart, and Twiggy, on how to adapt their own style to what was an appropriate style for teen girls. Perhaps the most unique aspect of Gloria Stavers and 16's influence on teen consumer culture was that the magazine did not publish outside advertising. The magazine's profits were generated solely from its newsstand sales, subscriptions, and affiliated publications. As Gloria Stavers cultivated new generations of consumers, she did so without the influence of any outside companies with vested interests in selling their products, aside from the obvious influence of music promoters. The considerable monthly circulation indicates that teen girls were very receptive to the space created for them by Stavers. They were able to dream and fantasize about their fave rags without intrusion from corporate outsiders, and they were encouraged to do so with content directed and created by a woman who had been there and understood their concerns. Stavers once stated, quote, "Girls from 10 to 15 are in a period of development more intense than any other period in their lives. By the time a girl actually reaches 16, she's ready to leave the dream world, and 16 is way behind her." Stavers gained readers' trust and confidence through her direct approach of communicating with them in her letters and columns, 16's positive depiction of female celebrities, and consistent reinforcement of the ways in which her readers could become unique and popular individuals. In essence, Stavers used the pages of 16 to encourage teen girls to become consumers. This would not only encourage sales of the magazine, but of the artist's recordings, films, fan club subscriptions, and any other products affiliated with them. Stavers' logic was clear. As long as the stars stayed popular, her magazine would sell, and the artists, recognizing the influence 16 had on their popularity, would continue to offer exclusive interviews, photos, and features to the magazine, perpetuating the consumer cycle. Peter Noon, lead singer of Herman's Hermits and a very popular 16 fave rave, explained how Stavers depicted the stars in her magazine and ultimately revealed the crucial factor in Stavers' motivations. Quote, "We showed up in 16 in all sorts of intimate photos, but never with groupies that were hanging around. Gloria wouldn't take that kind of picture because she believed that every girl, every reader owned me. That girl, that 16 reader was somebody to be protected. You couldn't hurt her. That's what Gloria taught us. She was the protectress of this little flock of children. 16 always respected the fans, and so did I." End quote. So, in the midst of the Cold War, teen magazines played influential roles in teen girl culture. The producers of these magazines crafted their products to instill consumer ethics in their readers, as well as the values of responsibility, independent thinking, and creativity. Teen magazines such as 17 and 16 clearly conformed to the American ideals of consumerism that were pervasive in the Cold War era. While Helen Valentine in 17 attempted to cultivate civic consumers, Gloria Stavers in 16 encouraged girls to explore their dreamsville, not only through fantasy, but through consumerism as well. Through their respective methods and goals, 17 and 16 both sought to cultivate generations of good girls and better consumers.